They swore to defend America and protect its citizens. Instead, these Air Force servicemen became some of the nation's most prolific serial killers. Military service represents the highest form of public trust and sacrifice. These men took an oath to defend American lives, then spent years taking them. From California's freeways to Kansas neighborhoods, they turned service into slaughter. Welcome to Savage Case Files, where we expose the most shocking betrayals, brutal crimes, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Today's episode: 5 U.S. Air Force men who turned military discipline into murder sprees that terrorized America. Subscribe now to never miss our crime stories into the darkest betrayals of trust. 5 Air Force servicemen became serial killers with over 70 confirmed victims. Their killing sprees spanned nearly 3 decades of terror. Military training that should have protected Americans was used to hunt them instead. California became a hunting ground for multiple Air Force killers. From the Pacific Coast to the Great Plains, no region was safe from their reach. These men used their military mobility to spread death across state lines, leaving devastation in their wake. Young men and women who trusted the wrong people became their victims. Hitchhikers, runaways, and innocent civilians were targeted by predators who wore the uniform of service. Families were destroyed by men who were supposed to defend them. Military organization applied to torture and killing created some of America's most methodical murderers. Organized disposal methods learned from service training helped them evade capture for years. Coded records and systematic approaches to mass murder showed how military skills enhanced their deadly capabilities. The freeway killer, BTK, scorecard killer, trash bag killer, toolbox killers, each name represents years of terror and dozens of victims. Media nicknames that became synonymous with evil across multiple states. These weren't random killers, but organized predators with military training. From 1965 to 1991, these men killed with impunity while maintaining their military connections. Decades of murder while wearing the uniform of service raised uncomfortable questions about screening and oversight. How did the military miss the monsters in their ranks? Execution, death row, life sentences, justice was finally served for their crimes. Some died in prison, others await their final punishment on death row. The question remains, how many more victims could there have been if they hadn't been caught? 5 cases that expose how military service can mask the darkest evil imaginable. From decorated airmen to death row inmates, these men represent the ultimate betrayal of military values. We'll examine how these men used their training to become America's most feared killers. What role did Air Force service play in creating these killers? Did military training enhance their ability to murder and evade capture? The uncomfortable questions about screening and oversight that the military still faces today. 5 airmen, over 70 victims. Decades of terror that shocked America and changed how we view military service. Case by case, we'll reveal how service members became serial killers who used their training for evil. Case 1. William George Bonin. William George Bonin served his country in the U.S. Air Force during the Vietnam War era, earning decorations and commendations for his military service. Born in 1947, Bonin appeared to be a model serviceman who had answered his nation's call to duty. His military record showed competence and dedication, giving no indication of the monster that would emerge after his discharge. Following his honorable discharge from the Air Force, Bonin returned to California, where he struggled to adapt to civilian life. The structure and discipline that had defined his military service gave way to a chaotic existence without clear purpose or direction. What his fellow airmen and commanding officers never suspected was that Bonin harbored dark impulses that military discipline had kept in check. In 1972, Bonin committed his first known murder, beginning what would become one of California's most notorious killing sprees. The freeway killer was born on the highways and byways of Southern California, where young men became targets for a predator who combined military training with sadistic impulses. Bonin's hunting grounds were California's extensive freeway system, which he knew intimately from his post-military life as a truck driver. His knowledge of roads, terrain, and traffic patterns, enhanced by his military experience with navigation and logistics, made him a particularly elusive killer. The freeway system became his personal hunting preserve, where he could find victims and dispose of bodies with military efficiency. His victims were primarily young men, often hitchhikers or runaways who trusted the wrong person at the wrong time. These vulnerable targets had no idea they were encountering a predator with military training, who had perfected his methods through years of killing. Each victim represented someone's son, brother, or friend whose life was cut short by a man who had sworn to protect American lives. Bonin's methods showed the systematic approach he had learned during his Air Force service. He would abduct victims, torture them with military-style interrogation techniques, and then kill them before disposing of their bodies in remote locations. His organized approach to murder demonstrated how military logistics training could be perverted for the most evil purposes. Over 8 years, from 1972 to 1980, Bonin killed at least 21 confirmed victims, though investigators suspect the actual number may be higher. The freeway killer's reign of terror continued largely unchecked as he used his military-trained discipline to avoid capture while continuing his murder spree across Southern California. Bonin recruited accomplices to help with his murders, demonstrating the leadership skills he had developed during his military service. The former airman became a commander in murder, directing others in the systematic torture and killing of innocent victims. His ability to organize and lead others made him even more dangerous than a lone killer. The investigation into the freeway killer murders spanned multiple law enforcement agencies and jurisdictions as Bonin's crimes crossed county and city lines throughout Southern California. Police faced a predator who used military-style operational security to avoid detection while continuing to kill with increasing frequency and brutality. In 1980, after 8 years of terror, Bonin was finally captured when witnesses identified him in connection with his final murder. The evidence linking him to the freeway killer murders was overwhelming, including physical evidence, witness testimony, and his own confessions to multiple killings. During his trial, prosecutors presented evidence of systematic murder that shocked even experienced court personnel. Bonin was convicted of multiple counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death for his crimes against innocent victims. The jury determined that his military training had made him a more dangerous killer who deserved the ultimate punishment. On February 23, 1996, William George Bonin was executed by lethal injection at San Quentin State Prison. The freeway killer paid the ultimate price for turning his military training into a tool for mass murder. His execution brought closure to the families of his victims and ended one of California's most notorious serial killing cases. Bonin's case highlighted how military training could enhance a killer's abilities and make them more elusive to law enforcement. His systematic approach to murder, learned through Air Force service, made him one of California's most prolific and dangerous serial killers. The question remains whether better psychological screening could have identified his potential for violence before he received military training. Case 2, Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader served in the U.S. Air Force from 1966 to 1970, stationed in various locations including Alabama, Texas, Greece, and Turkey. Born in 1945, Rader appeared to be a dedicated serviceman who fulfilled his military obligations with competence and reliability. His Air Force service provided him with technical training and organizational skills that would later prove instrumental in his decades-long career as a serial killer. After his honorable discharge, Rader returned to Kansas, where he built what appeared to be a model civilian life. He worked as a compliance officer for the city of Wichita enforcing municipal codes and regulations with the same methodical approach he had learned in the military. By day, he was a respected city employee and family man. By night, he was planning and executing some of the most methodical murders in American criminal history. Rader adopted the signature BTK, bind, torture, kill, which perfectly described his systematic approach to murder. His military training in following procedures and maintaining operational security allowed him to develop a consistent method that he would use throughout his killing career. Each murder followed the same organized pattern, showing the discipline and structure he had learned during his Air Force service. On January 15, 1974, Rader launched his killing career with the massacre of the Otero family in their Wichita home. Joseph Otero, his wife Julie, and two of their children, 11-year-old Josephine and 9-year-old Joseph Jr., were systematically murdered in what appeared to be a military-style operation. Rader had studied the family, planned his attack, and executed it with the methodical approach of a military mission. Rader's hunting pattern demonstrated the reconnaissance skills he had developed during his military service. He would stalk potential victims for weeks or months, studying their routines and identifying vulnerabilities before striking. His targets were carefully selected based on accessibility and opportunity, showing the strategic thinking that military training had instilled in him. What set BTK apart from other serial killers was his compulsive need to communicate with authorities and the media. Rader sent letters, packages, and other communications that taunted police while providing details only the killer could know. His military training in communications and documentation created a killer who meticulously recorded his crimes while maintaining operational security for decades. Between 1974 and 1991, Rader killed 10 confirmed victims in the Wichita area, including men, women, and children. Each murder was carefully planned and executed with military efficiency, showing how his Air Force training had enhanced his ability to kill while avoiding detection. His victims included the Oteros, Catherine Bright, Shirley Vian, Nancy Fox, Maureen Hedge, Vicki Wegerly, and Dolores Davis. After his final known murder in 1991, BTK went silent for over a decade, leading investigators to believe he had either died, been imprisoned for other crimes, or simply stopped killing. However, Rader was still alive and living in Wichita, maintaining his double life as a respected city employee while harboring his deadly secrets. In 2004, BTK resurfaced with new communications to police and media, apparently triggered by renewed attention to his unsolved cases. His ego and need for recognition overcame the operational security that had protected him for 3 decades. The killer's desire for credit and control would ultimately lead to his downfall. Rader's fatal mistake came when he asked police if they could trace a floppy disk back to him. When authorities assured him they couldn't, he sent a disk that contained metadata linking directly to his church computer and his real identity. The military-trained killer's overconfidence finally betrayed him after 31 years of successful evasion. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested at his home in Park City, Kansas. The compliance officer who had spent decades enforcing city codes was revealed as the BTK killer who had terrorized Wichita for over 30 years. His military bearing and calm demeanor during arrest showed the discipline that had helped him maintain his deadly secret for so long. During his confession and court proceedings, Rader described his crimes with the same methodical detail he had learned in the military. He provided step-by-step accounts of each murder, showing how his Air Force training in documentation and procedure had influenced his approach to killing and record-keeping. Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would die in prison for his systematic murders. The BTK killer's military training had made him one of America's most elusive serial killers, but ultimately couldn't save him from justice when his ego overcame his operational security. Case 3. Randy Kraft. Randy Kraft served in the U.S. Air Force from 1967 to 1969, where he developed the technical and organizational skills that would later make him one of California's most methodical serial killers. Born in 1945, Kraft appeared to be an intelligent and capable airman who completed his military service without incident. After his discharge, he used his military training and natural intelligence to build a successful career as a computer programmer. What made Kraft unique among serial killers was his meticulous record-keeping system, a coded list that investigators would later call his scorecard. This document contained 61 cryptic entries that corresponded to his victims, showing the same attention to detail and systematic documentation that he had learned during his Air Force service. Military training and record-keeping and operational tracking had been perverted into a trophy list of murder victims. Kraft's killing spree began in the early 1970s and continued until his capture in 1983, spanning over a decade of systematic murder across California and Oregon. His victims were primarily young men, often hitchhikers, military personnel on leave, or men he met in bars. The killer used his military bearing and apparent respectability to gain victims' trust before drugging and torturing them to death. The scorecard revealed the true scope of Kraft's crimes, with entries like Stable, Angel, Twiggy, and Portland Blood, representing individual victims. Each coded entry demonstrated the organized mind of someone trained in military intelligence and documentation procedures. Investigators eventually linked 16 confirmed murders to Kraft, though they suspected he was responsible for all 61 entries on his list. Kraft's methods showed the systematic approach he had developed through military training and his work as a computer programmer. He would drug victims with a combination of alcohol and prescription medications, then torture them while they were helpless. His organized approach to murder included careful victim selection, methodical torture techniques, and systematic body disposal methods. The killer operated primarily along California's highways and in Oregon, using his knowledge of the region's geography to find isolated locations for his crimes. His military training in navigation and terrain analysis helped him identify perfect spots for abducting victims and disposing of bodies where they might not be discovered for months or years. Kraft's victims included Marines, sailors, and other military personnel who trusted a fellow veteran. He exploited the bond between service members, using his Air Force background to gain access to young military men who never suspected they were encountering a predator. His military connection made him particularly dangerous to other service members who let their guard down around someone they perceived as a brother in arms. The investigation into Kraft's crimes spanned multiple jurisdictions and years, as his systematic approach to murder made it difficult for law enforcement to connect the various cases. His military training and operational security helped him avoid detection while continuing to kill across state lines. Police faced a predator who understood how to compartmentalize his crimes and avoid establishing patterns that might lead to his capture. On May 14, 1983, Kraft's killing career ended when California Highway Patrol officers stopped him for erratic driving. In his car, they discovered the body of Terry Gambrell, a 25-year-old Marine who had been drugged and tortured to death. The scorecard found in Kraft's possession provided investigators with a roadmap to over a decade of systematic murder. During his trial, prosecutors presented evidence of the most organized and methodical serial killing spree in California history. The scorecard became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case, showing premeditation and the systematic nature of Kraft's crimes. His military training had created a killer capable of maintaining a murder spree for over a decade, while avoiding detection. Randy Kraft was convicted of 16 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death in 1989. The jury determined that his systematic approach to torture and murder, enhanced by his military training, warranted the ultimate punishment. He currently remains on California's death row, where he has been fighting appeals for over 3 decades. The scorecard killer case demonstrated how military training in documentation and systematic thinking could be applied to serial murder. Kraft's organized approach, learned through Air Force service and enhanced by his technical background, made him one of the most dangerous and elusive killers in American history. His scorecard remains one of the most chilling pieces of evidence ever discovered in a serial murder case. Case 4. Patrick Kearney. Patrick Kearney served in the U.S. Air Force during the 1960s, where he developed the methodical and organized approach that would later define his decade-long murder spree. Born in 1939, Kearney appeared to be a quiet and unremarkable serviceman who completed his military obligations without drawing attention to himself. His Air Force training in logistics and systematic procedures would later be applied to one of the most organized disposal methods in serial killer history. Kearney's killing career began in 1965 and continued until 1977, making him one of the longest inactive serial killers among the Air Force veterans. His victims were primarily young men whom he would shoot, then systematically dismember and package in trash bags for disposal. The methodical nature of his body disposal earned him the nickname Trash Bag Killer and demonstrated the organizational skills he had learned during his military service. What set Kearney apart was his systematic approach to victim disposal, which showed clear influence from his Air Force logistics training. He would carefully dismember bodies, package the remains in multiple trash bags, and dispose of them in remote locations across Southern California. His military training in supply chain management and systematic processing had been perverted into an efficient method for eliminating evidence of his crimes. Kearney killed at least 21 confirmed victims over his 12-year murder spree, though investigators suspect the actual number may be higher. His victims included hitchhikers, young men from bars, and other vulnerable targets who trusted the wrong person. The killer's military bearing and apparent respectability helped him gain victims' trust before leading them to their deaths. The investigation into the trash bag killer murders was complicated by Kearney's systematic disposal methods, which often left little evidence for investigators to work with. His military training in operational security and evidence management made him particularly difficult to catch, as he understood how to eliminate traces of his crimes. In 1977, Kearney voluntarily surrendered to authorities, confessing to his crimes in the same methodical manner he had used to commit them. His military discipline and systematic approach extended even to his confession, as he provided detailed accounts of his murders with the same organizational skills he had learned in the Air Force. Patrick Kearney was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, where he remains today. His case demonstrated how military logistics training could be applied to systematic murder and evidence disposal, making him one of the most organized killers in American criminal history. Case 5. Lawrence Bittaker. Lawrence Bittaker served in the U.S. Air Force before embarking on a criminal career that would culminate in some of the most horrific torture murders in American history. Born in 1940, Bittaker's military service provided him with technical knowledge and systematic thinking that he would later combine with his partner Roy Norris to create a mobile torture chamber. In 1979, Bittaker and Norris began their brief but incredibly brutal killing spree in California, targeting young women whom they would abduct, torture, and murder. Their weapon of choice was a van equipped with various tools for torture, earning them the nickname Toolbox Killers. Bittaker's military training in equipment maintenance and systematic procedures helped create one of the most organized torture operations in criminal history. The partnership between Bittaker and Norris represented a combination of military training and criminal experience that created an exceptionally dangerous team. Bittaker's Air Force background provided organizational skills and technical knowledge, while Norris contributed additional criminal expertise. Together, they developed systematic methods for abducting and torturing victims that showed clear military influence. Their 5 confirmed victims, Lucinda Schaefer, Andrea Hall, Jackie Gilliam, Jacqueline Leah Lamp, and Shirley Ledford, endured unimaginable torture before being murdered. The systematic nature of their torture methods showed how military training in equipment use and systematic procedures could be applied to the most evil purposes imaginable. The investigation into the toolbox killers was aided by audio recordings the killers had made of their torture sessions, providing horrific evidence of their systematic approach to murder. Bittaker's military training was evident in the organized and methodical nature of their crimes, which followed consistent patterns and procedures. Lawrence Bittaker was convicted and sentenced to death for his role in the torture murders. He spent decades on California's death row before dying of natural causes in 2019, never facing execution for his crimes. His death denied justice to the families of his victims, who had waited 40 years for his execution. 5 airmen who swore to defend America became predators who terrorized it for nearly 3 decades. William George Bonin killed at least 21 victims as the Freeway Killer before his execution in 1996. Dennis Rader murdered 10 people as BTK while serving 10 consecutive life sentences. Randy Kraft remains on death row for 16 confirmed murders, though his scorecard suggests 67 total victims. Patrick Kearney systematically killed 21-plus people as the Trash Bag Killer and serves life without parole. Lawrence Bittaker tortured 5 women to death as part of the Toolbox Killers before dying on death row in 2019. These men represent a disturbing pattern of how military service can mask the darkest evil. Their Air Force training provided organizational skills, systematic thinking, and operational security that made them more dangerous and elusive killers. Military discipline that should have protected American lives was perverted into methods for taking them with unprecedented efficiency and brutality. Which case shocked you the most? The Freeway Killer who used California's highways as his hunting ground? BTK's decades-long reign of terror while working as a city compliance officer? The Scorecard Killer's coded list of 61 suspected victims? The systematic dismemberment methods of the Trash Bag Killer? Or the Toolbox Killer's mobile torture chamber? Share your thoughts on these cases that exposed the darkest potential of military-trained predators. Should the military bear greater responsibility for psychological screening and ongoing monitoring of service members? These 5 men completed their Air Force service and received honorable discharges before beginning their killing careers. Their cases raise uncomfortable questions about whether better screening could have identified their potential for violence before they received training that enhanced their criminal capabilities. Do you believe military training actually created these killers, or did it simply attract individuals already predisposed to violence who then used their service experience to become more effective predators? The debate continues over whether military service transforms people or merely provides tools that can be used for good or evil, depending on the individual's character. The geographic impact of these killers stretched from California to Kansas, with no region safe from their military-trained methods. California bore the heaviest burden, with 4 of the 5 killers operating within the state at various times. Their mobility and systematic approaches allowed them to spread terror across multiple states while avoiding detection for years or decades. Over 70 confirmed victims lost their lives to these military-trained predators, though the actual number may be much higher. Each victim represents a life cut short by men who had sworn to protect American citizens. Young hitchhikers, military personnel, families in their homes, and innocent civilians became targets for predators who exploited the trust that military service typically commands. The timeline of terror spanned from 1965 to 1991, representing a generation of killing by Air Force veterans who used their training for evil. Some operated simultaneously in the same regions, creating overlapping waves of terror that law enforcement struggled to understand and combat. Their systematic approaches and operational security made them particularly difficult to catch and prosecute. Justice eventually prevailed through execution, death sentences, and life imprisonment, but not before these men had claimed dozens of innocent lives. Some families waited decades for closure, watching appeals drag on while their loved ones' killers remained alive in prison. The legal system's response showed that military service provides no immunity from the consequences of evil actions. The broader questions raised by these cases continue to challenge military leadership and criminal justice professionals. How can the armed forces better identify individuals with violent tendencies? What role does military training play in enhancing criminal capabilities? How do we balance the need for effective military training with the risk of creating more dangerous criminals? This has been Savage Case Files, examining how military service can mask the most dangerous predators in American society. Subscribe for more investigations into the darkest betrayals of trust and the pursuit of justice. Hit the notification bell to never miss our examinations of evil that shocked the nation. 5 men who chose evil over honor, death over duty. Their military training made them more dangerous killers, but ultimately couldn't save them from facing justice for their crimes against the innocent Americans they had sworn to protect.